Hello, welcome back to Movie Husbands. Today we're reviewing The Substance. Directed by Coralie Fargeat, Elizabeth Sparkle, renowned for an aerobics show, faces a devastating blow on her 50th birthday as her boss fires her. Amid her distress, a laboratory offers her a substance which promises to transform her into an enhanced version of herself. The film stars Demi Moore, Margaret, Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. So Jeffrey, what do you think about The Substance?
So we finally got you to watch a body horror movie. I'm just going to name some things that you have some trouble with, and let's just say they're at random. Needles, squishy sounds, gore, like extreme violence, weird things happening in bodies. Mm-hmm. So how'd you do?
I'm surprised you didn't start with anything except for how did I do?
Well, I can tell you what I thought of The Substance. I thought The Substance was wild. I first came across this filmmaker with her film Revenge, and I believe I characterized that film to you by this very interesting image towards the end of the film that there's a chase sequence and the man had fallen into a lot of blood and he is running around naked where his flopping. That gives you an idea of what this filmmaker is interested in. That film has some extreme subject matter, just like this film, but the editing and the chaotically pulpy style made it easier to not take that film as seriously, and I think that that's replicated here. The quality, which I really like, by the way, that's replicated in The Substance, at the expense of just throwing like abstract film criticism around, it has a very distinct and confident vision. I haven't seen a lot of films in my life that look like this one. I haven't seen a lot of films in my life that are stylized in quite this way. There's a particular like poppy, colorful, contrast-laden color palette that feels very original, and along with the frantic editing style and this really pulse-pounding soundtrack, it's genuinely extraordinary to watch, along with like a lot of very, very interesting body effects. The prosthetics and beyond the grossness of it, the fact that these effects look as good as they do is, I really think, a testament to that team. It's a film of insane maximalism, like in everything from obliterating stylization to its utter devotion to this violent subject matter to thematic material that's frankly very obvious and remarkably unsubtle. That I think feeds into the maximalist effort. Though some details of that allegory really need parsing out, I think that you would be very oblivious to miss what this film is actually about. It's not perfect, but it does feel exhilarating and daringly original in ways that I don't see a lot.
Well, I'm glad that you found it exhilarating. Before I do talk about this film, I think we do need to set in a bit of personal context, which you described a little bit already. I generally do not like horror movies. I personally have a lot of trouble seeing physical violence, gory imagery, and so much so that it can result in me feeling very physically ill and nauseous and anxious. And the reason I say all that is because I think it creates this natural bias that I'm going to have against the film right from the get-go. There is so much blood in this film, sounds of gross bodily movements and fluids, and the worst of all, the needles. If you don't know, I have a terrible, terrible phobia of needles, and this film has them constantly
Literally
and consistently.
Constantly.
I probably missed a fifth of this film because I had to cover my eyes from the amount of needles that were on display in this film going through bodies and body parts. And
you were finding, like, if there was a corner of the theater seat, you were finding it. You were like there, and the movie is so long. I had no idea that this movie was 2 hours and 20 minutes long. I thought it was just like an even 2 hours.
Yeah.
And as it kept going, I said, for Matt's sake, this really needs to end soon.
Yeah. And how the substance works is by injecting it through a needle consistently, and the feedings and all of that, which we'll get into. It's too much for me. So it should come to no one's surprise here that I had a terrible time watching this movie and I never want to see it again. But
It's pretty good, though.
But let me also be clear, this is not a bad film. This is actually a very good film.
Yeah.
The film is very effective at creating the reactions it really does desire. It wants you to feel uncomfortable. It wants you to squirm in your seat, and it also wants you to think. And so even though I really despise this film, I really commend it for nailing its message so hammeringly using such effective, haunting imagery. So speaking to that imagery that you have been talking about, one of the intro shots to this film is of this star on the Walk of Fame that is being put together for Elizabeth Sparkle's character, played by Demi Moore. After that, we are taking a little bit through her life. She is doing her workout classes, which are being taped, and there's Dennis Quaid's character that plays her boss. In a conversation in the bathroom, she overhears that she is not wanted anymore and that he is planning to get rid of her. It's not just that she's being fired, it's for the reasons she's being fired. She's old, she's unwanted, she's ugly. So when she goes home that day, there's this very prominent portrait on the wall, and she's staring at it in this new light. She sees disgust by this person. And this is a piece of imagery that actually plays itself quite frequently throughout the film and changes and evolves as the film progresses.
The film has a ton of imagery that's really interesting. And most of the time, this imagery comes up, it's underlining the theme that we already know is going on. But at the same time, that imagery is really interesting throughout the film. How that portrait morphs and how it gets broken and various other things happen to it is certainly in line with a lot of what the film is going for. I think you can't undermine how interesting this film is visually. A lot of the symbolism has to do with the same thing, but at the same time, the way that they maximize that symbolism for the thematics is really interesting and really cool.
So talking about this imagery and this building of disgust that she has for herself after being fired, she ends up coming across this person who tells her that there's this thing called the substance, a drug in which she could take to make herself young again. This is what leads her on a gruesome adventure of self-discovery of youth and aging and your worth to society based upon how you look. There's so much packed into it, but that's just a little semblance of what we're getting here in this film.
I don't want to spoil exactly how this comes about, but one of the rules of the substance is that you are your younger self for 7 days and then your older self for 7 days, and you have to switch back. Otherwise, there's some consequences that will happen. That becomes very important. And the people in the substance, or the people selling the substance, doesn't seem like she ever pays, by the way.
It's so weird.
Yeah, the marketing of the substance, I have some questions. Their helpline, the guy seems really mean. So the film constantly reminds us, and even flashes on screen sometimes, remember, you are one.
Yeah.
The young side and the older side, they affect one another with what they do in their separate time.
So going from there, I want to talk briefly about Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley in this film. I think they did a wonderful job elevating the film. They were so raw, intimate, and really fearless.
Demi Moore in particular, I mean, no disrespect to Margaret Qualley, but I haven't seen Demi Moore act like this in a very long time, certainly since the 90s. I haven't seen her in a ton, so maybe
I was going to say,
maybe she has some
opportunity
she has
upon what the message of the film is.
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think she's had some TV roles. I think she's still acting, but she maybe hasn't been given the opportunity to act on this level in quite some time.
I do want to talk about Dennis Quaid's character. His introduction in the film is very gross.
He's peeing.
Yes, he is peeing, but his face is severely right up in front of the camera, and his face is all like...
I didn't have a phobia of eating shrimp until this movie, until Dennis Quaid started eating shrimp, and now I don't think I can ever eat shrimp again.
So the film is really catering to this overall idea and concept of the expectations that are put on men and women differently. And I think that couldn't be more apparent in this first scene that we have with the two of them at lunch, and he's shoving these prawns down his face very disgustingly. But she is, well dressed. She is sitting upright, and he is just leaning forward. There's just food all over his face. The sounds of him eating the prawns, it's extremely disgusting. And yes, it is exaggerated. A lot of this film is
very exaggerated, yeah.
But there's truth in that exaggeration, which makes it very compelling also.
I think on some level, even though the film is meant to gross you out and it is like a horror thriller, I do think there's a farcical and satirical element here, that everything is exaggerated to some point so that it makes the themes clearer, and then makes it clearer how they're part of a metaphor and an allegory. As I said in my opening, the film is absolutely maximalist. It is way over the top from the second it starts. That includes some really go for broke body horror and some special effects. I said to you after the film ended that I wanted to look up the production budget of it, and it was $15 million. And I think that what they were able to achieve in production design and prosthetic special effects is really extraordinary for that budget. Even as the film's ridiculous body horror goes further and further down the rabbit hole, the special effects team is up for the challenge, and they seem to be one-upping themselves with more and more gross stuff as this movie goes on. Everything from a splitting spine to a deformed finger to a very, very wild creation towards the end of the film that I'm not going to spoil here. But not for a second did I say, that looks fake. On some level, the story is unbelievable because it's exaggerated, but what you're actually seeing does look quite real. It's great work. With that sense of going for broke and overdoing every possible thing, the film's loud production design and this pummeling, squishy sound design that the sound people were able to achieve, that same maximalism makes a story and theme feel beaten to death as well. Clearly about beauty standards. Even though we've come a long way in some regards with beauty standards and praising youth, I don't think that we're beyond that at all. I mean, we have things like Botox and Ozempic and plastic surgery, and all of these things, they come with risks, they come with side effects. They're as popular as ever, and people are willing to take those risks in order to appear younger or retain their beauty. So I actually think that the film is as timely as ever. You brought up the very good point that men in the film are treated quite differently at their age than Elizabeth is at her age. Dennis Quaid's character we were talking about, he's this disgusting misogynist. He drools over Sue's character, but he's so dismissive of Elizabeth's character. Anyway, this is a way to say that the film's commitment to the metaphor is much stronger than its believability at times, and I think that's partly by design. It has a way of bolding and underlining and circling its themes over and over and over again until you just want to say, like, okay, I get it. I get it. But luckily, there are many things I love about this film, even though it's like fragrantly unsubtle.
I mean, there's a freaking billboard right outside of her apartment window just with her face plastered on it. Just like, there's no way that's reality.
Yeah, and I'm not sure you can have both. Like, this film is clearly meaning to go for broke and being over the top, and I'm not sure you could fit subtlety in there.
Oh, you can't.
It's a casualty of that type of filmmaking. The film is very devoted to its aesthetic and metaphor, and natural consequence of that is you don't have very fleshed out characters. These people aren't really three-dimensional beings. Like, if you think back to something like Animal Farm, which was a satire, right? The pigs represent big business and the horses represent the working class. That's something that's very common in satirical allegory, and that's the same thing here. And I could see how a film watcher, maybe even such as yourself, that prioritizes character and likes to identify with characters can kind of balk at the idea that these characters really represent ideas and not much else.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Demi Moore's character herself could be any Hollywood actress who has struggled with the way they look because of all the expectations that the industry has put on them and the way it so easily discards women as they get older. But her character doesn't really go anywhere beyond that. We don't really get to know her personally.
She likes French cooking.
That's a little joke for the movie.
I think that some of the lack of characterization in the film is actually corrected by the fact that they casted Demi Moore. Because I'm not sure if you're aware of the whole history of her, but from a period of, like, say, 1988 to maybe 1996, she was one of the highest paid actresses in Hollywood. In fact, when she was hired for a film Striptease, I think she was paid $12.5 million. And at that time, that was the highest an actress had ever been paid for a film. So she was like a sex symbol in some degree in the 90s. And by casting her, this film is actually commenting on Demi Moore's career in some way because, you know, she has aged. She looks amazing, by the way.
She does.
Yeah. I mean, she's 61 years old. But the fact that she's cast in this actually reminds me a little bit of Michael Keaton in Birdman. Like, it's hard to divorce Michael Keaton's career having been Batman from his character in Birdman. So it adds an extra metatextual element that I really like.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more about those sexual undertones in the film that you had just mentioned, because with Margaret Qualley's character, once she is introduced in the film, we really get a sense of the amount of attention that is put onto her, the amount of close-ups that are on her butt, close-ups on her hips gyrating.
Yeah.
What is the purpose of her and what makes her so special to begin with is her sex appeal. And that's the only reason that Dennis Quaid's character cares about her. I think that's just a brilliant undertone of the film and just another piece that fits into this overarching message.
So I know you won't agree with this, but I think the film just like absolutely flew by. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I will say it's definitely too long. I really like the last 20 minutes. I think that they're just gold. They're absolutely bizarre. One of the most bizarre things I've seen in a movie theater in years. I'm not sure that this needed to be 2 hours and 20 minutes long, but I will say that I was having a lot of fun. I was very engaged. I thought it was really gross, and I thought that just the general tone of the film is something that I don't see very often. In keeping with that, I think the score is great. That's by Rafferty. I'm not familiar with him, but I think he's an electronic music producer. It just has this pulsating, pounding score that just keeps the film moving all the way through. I thought that was really great too.
I agree with everything you said, except for your enjoyment of the film, because this was absolute torture for me. If I could show you a picture of us in the theater, it was Jeffrey acting like a giddy school kid, like this, and me just in my seat, like,
and me,
no.
and when I would have to tap you whenever the needle
was done.
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, the needle scene's good.
So can we talk about the end?
Sure.
Alrighty. So if you haven't seen The Substance, I recommend coming back to this review once you do, if you don't want to be spoiled. So the ending, the blood, the gore, the weird,
what is she? She's like a
cellular
monster.
Okay. So
yeah, try to describe it for the people.
Okay, I will describe it. But basically what happens is there's the activator of the substance, and the first thing that splits your cells into two, and actually there's imagery right at the beginning of the film that shows the egg, that's they injecting the egg yolk and it splits into two egg yolks. This is basically a little metaphor at the beginning of the movie for how the substance works. This particular activator says not to use more than once and discard after you use it. She goes back because everything's falling apart and she decides to use the activator again. The problem with this is that ends up multiplying her cells by more than just 2. It's like an ungodly amount. So what happens is that she becomes very visibly deformed. She has body parts in different locations.
She has Demi Moore's face is in her back.
Yeah, Demi Moore's face, like looking almost as if she did at the very beginning of the movie,
Yeah.
is just right plastered on her back. She doesn't really have ears,
Yeah.
so she's putting her earrings in at one point before she goes back to the set for this New Year's Eve thing.
A random breast just shoots out.
Ugh.
And it has like a little trail, like an eyeball.
Jeffrey, no. Okay. But the earrings, and she's sticking them in her head. Oh, gosh. Like, why'd you make me describe this?
I don't know, because I thought it would be funny. Again, I thought that the last 20 minutes of this was just pure gold. There's a series of things. People are calling her a monster. You're disgusting. They're trying to hit her with an axe. She's spraying blood against all of them. As we come to the end of the film, we come back to her star, which is where the film started. And I believe she falls and like explodes. And there's a little like gulk bit of her with her face that crawls over to her star and just like melts into the star until she's a goo.
Yeah.
And then somebody just comes along in the morning and wipes her away. I thought that was brilliant. It was disgusting, but I mean, it was a brilliant way to end this film.
I completely agree. So you ready to go to grades?
I am. I'm going to give this a B+. I thought that this movie was a blast. And this is the most insane thing I've seen in a movie. I don't want to overhype this. You know what? I think I can't overhype it because when you go to see this movie, I don't think you're prepared for the weird stuff that happens in it. Like, it's bizarre. I found it gross, but I have watched body horror films. I've watched a lot of horror films. I can't say it really bothered me, but I was still thrilled with the audacity of this thing. In addition to that, I do genuinely think it's really well directed. I think it has a very unique aesthetic and a very unique pulsating kind of intense tone that I just loved. And the production design is fantastic, and I can't wait to see what this director does next.
I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think the mechanicals of the film, the building blocks of what make a good movie a movie, are really all there. I came into this review actually being like, I don't think I could give this a grade, but I feel like you wouldn't accept that. So I give this movie a B if I had to critically review it, and that is slightly affected by the ways in which I did not like the film in terms of its imagery.
I think it's a totally fair grade.
And I give this movie an F for my personal enjoyment of the film. And that is nothing against the film itself. It's just I would never see this again.
So when and if we hit 10,000 subscribers, we'll do a live watch with this substance.
I literally did this for the channel. I did this for Movie Husbands. I never want to see a movie like this again. If you pull me to another movie and I have to sit here and do this one more time.
If we continue to do Movie Husbands, there's going to be other films like this. Like, this is a genre. This is a thing. This happens.
I feel like we could do one of those Movie Husband reviews where you just do it yourself. How about that?
Yeah, we could do that.
Unless this is just entertainment to you and you just need me here.
I meant to tell you this actually, that I am more affected by these films when you're with me because I feel bad for you.
Aww.
Like, so like I was a little more grossed out or a little more trepidatious with what was going on screen because I'm like, I think Matt is really squirming through this right now. Whereas if I was alone, I would just be cackling, having a wonderful time.
I get anxiety or having to get my blood drawn that when I think about needles, the pain in my arm starts to express itself. When I see that gory imagery, I feel visibly, like I thought I was getting like nauseous. We were walking out of the theater. I'm like, maybe I'll throw up. Maybe I won't throw up. I don't know. Probably not. But that's the way I felt. All right, and that's it for our review of The Substance. The Substance is now in theaters, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Let us know in the comments, what did you think about this film? As always, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.